Hello, Commissioner. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Commissioner, let's first start with who you are, and how you got to this point, right? Be a commissioner for a city agency in the city of New York. So just give us like a brief bio.
Of course. I'm a proud Boricua, born and raised in Puerto Rico, who had parents working in the public sector in Puerto Rico and just somehow I guess it just translated. It's like a genetic thing, I suppose, that I took from them and decided that I really wanted to be in the public sector. And coming to New York was really where I started my professional career after law school and have stayed since. I started did some work in the federal government and then move on to did a little bit of a piece in the city, and then most of my time was at the state before becoming a commissioner. Always sort of following the theme of, I guess you could call it civil rights, in terms of all of the various work that I've done. Certainly big piece on worker protection. That's probably the piece that I did the most time. And then my previous job before this one in at the state, that's when I really did consumer protection. And then here we are, just excited. I love it. I mean, I sought it out, so I knew that I was gonna like it. But it's kind of nice when you actually make a decision to pursue something and you actually have a good time doing that work. So that's
What,
a little bit of a summary.
so just for the layperson, right? What is the function of the Department of Consumer Worker Protection? What is the average person, right, that doesn't know city government? What should they know about the work of the agency? What is the agency meant to do on behalf of the citizens of the city of New York?
100%. I really appreciate that question. Listen, our name is
Can I
Department
tell
of
you, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to sort
Youth.
of, so I find, right, and I'm pretty sure you experience it. For most people, right, people just don't distinguish city, state, federal. Meaning when
100%.
someone needs help and they see an elected official or someone in city government, they assume you cover, I remember during Hurricane Ida, I'll give you an example. They people had lost mostly everything. And they didn't really distinguish who was from the state, who was from the federal government. It's like who can help, right? So I think it's important for people to know, sort of understand what the role of the agency does and what the footprint is. So I'm sorry I got interrupted, but that's
No,
really the why I posed the question.
I think it's great. I think it's a great question, and I think it's important to say that because actually, when I was at the Attorney General's office, that was one of my previous positions. We did a lot of work related to immigration services fraud, and we used to, because immigration is a federal matter, right, and things like that. We used to use this pyramid to try to explain to people how you had the federal government and the state government and the city government, but really only to sort of say who's who, recognizing that after all of that, government is government for the layperson, as you mentioned, right? It's
Mhm.
just like, are you going to help me or not? That's really it. From our perspective, one thing that I enjoy doing when I start like a conversation with someone is think about it this way: everyone is a consumer from birth to death. You're always going to be a consumer in one way or another, and that's my hook usually to try to get people to listen to us. You're going to need us. I want you to need us. I don't want you to need us. I want you to know that we're there for you if you need us. But everyday interactions, you're always going to be working and dealing with something that in many ways relates to the agency, right? To the work that we do. And the best way to explain it right with that is like if you're working in the city, if you're buying something in the city, if you're a business in the city, you're interacting with us. Many people knew us as a licensing agency, right? For many decades ago. We do issue tens of thousands of licenses in over 40 industries. So that's one big piece of our work. And sometimes, if you work into a business, for example, and it's an electronics place or it's a bodega, and maybe they sell some tobacco products, like you are going to see you should see our license so that the person can be conducting that type of business. You go to the grocery store and you go to Whole Foods and you buy something from the buffet and you put it on a scale. Guess what? We inspect those scales, right? And it's fascinating for people like, what? It's like we are there looking out to make sure that New Yorkers are protected in the most simplest of ways, on our everyday lives. And so that's the piece on the most basic, I would say, with consumer protection. And of course, it can go on all the way to our oversight of home improvement contractors, or if you're buying a car from a secondhand automobile dealership, those types of things. But we also do our worker protection work, right? Which is the more recent work that we started doing when there was legislation passed in 2014 for paid save and sick leave, which simply means, you know what? You get sick, you got to take care of a loved one, take the time. Please don't come sick to work and get paid for it. Right. And the protections that that offers and how we did such a good job and it's such a good law, right? It got replicated at the state level. And that's what took us into the worker protection area. But there are some industries like retail, fast food, delivery workers, right, that are very New York City, and it has laws that are specific to those who live or work in New York City. And then what has become sort of my obsession is our Office of Financial Empowerment. And I think part of that is the newest area for me, professionally and as an individual, and just that I never knew I could have these services and be in a better position financially by using them. And that's the Office of Financial Empowerment and the services that we offer to empower individuals with knowledge to make informed decisions when it comes to their finances in the simplest of ways. With, like, do you have a bank account? Is it a safe and affordable bank account? What are your goals? How do you reach your financial goals? That type of thing. How's that?
Very good. And free tax prep.
Yeah, that is part of our financial empowerment work.
Yeah,
And it's like that's the piece that you don't realize.
anytime people hear free, they love that. I like that word. I like that
It's
word.
free. And you know what's crazy, Roberta? Because sometimes we say, if it's free, no, somebody's paying for it. I was like, yeah, government is paying for it. We're paying for you to get a service that we know is quality, that is professional, that is going to maximize the credits that you're entitled to. And we don't want you to spend money getting that service from somewhere else. If you qualify, why not? We really here want to do it. We do it in conjunction with community-based organizations so that you go to a trusted place as well.
So, Commissioner, let's start with the balance you have to strike. Bodega, right? There are people that will say, I'm barely making it, making nickels, pennies to the dollar. It's a dying industry. It is. They're getting gobbled up by big box stores or the mom and pop grocers. Complain about the city enforcement, right? Their argument is, overregulation, fines. I don't get a warning. There's no cure period. Fine. It's difficult to own and operate. If you look at commercial vacancies of commercial corridor streets that were once thriving with small businesses are really, there's a lot of vacancies up and down commercial corridors, and business improvement districts will make the argument. Now, you as the commissioner, right, like everything else, there has to be a balance, right? Yes. Small businesses overwhelmingly employ immigrants, undocumented, low wage, low skilled workers. What do you make? What's the argument, and what procedurally happens, right? Do you go in a supermarket, one of your inspectors, and say, hey, this is missing a price, a can. Here you go. Read about it. Here's the fine. Well, or is there a sort of walkthrough where they say, well, that sign really belongs there, and or how does walk me through what happens too in that case?
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I think it's important to please, I beg people to really believe us. We do start with education. We really believe in education first, particularly with new regulations. And however, it is hard. I think you're absolutely right that it's just very difficult to have a business in New York City. There's so much regulation. We talked earlier about you have local regulation, you have state regulation, you have federal regulation. There's a lot of things to comply with. And so I'll give you a number of resources that we have and a number of tools that we use that we hope that especially those who are listening, or know somebody, if you're listening, but maybe you don't own the business, but you know somebody who do, that can help us spread the word because we want people to benefit and use the services. One of the things just yesterday, actually, I was in the Bronx doing what we call business education days, right? Where we go, sometimes we partner with local elected officials, sometimes the team just goes and we try to hit in a few hours 70 plus businesses. Sometimes we reach 100 with the idea of an educational visit, really sharing information so that businesses know what are the laws they need to comply with from our agency, right? Because it is a big city, there's a lot of agencies and a lot of regulations, but at least the ones that our inspectors will go in and look for compliance, we want you to know those. And the way we do it, I think is great. This happened, I'm not going to take credit for it because it happened before my time, but we've been trying to do more and more of them, is that we have inspection checklists. They are exactly what our inspectors use from their iPad when they walk into a business. They're just looking what type of business are you, and they're just gonna go down that checklist to make sure that you're like checking off all the boxes. And we give that checklist. It's on our website too, but we give it when we go right to the businesses doing these education visits so that they know. You could do your own walkthrough and see. When I do them myself, there's an inspector that comes as well, and they're going to give you some examples and we'll ask you some questions. Hey, like, there's the pricing piece, yes, but sometimes it's a refund, right? And what happens, what I've learned, because I genuinely love talking to the businesses directly, because you hear from them, and I love explaining the why and the rationale to the extent that I know it of some laws, right? So that usually you get more buying that way. The refund policy is a requirement. Listen, it doesn't matter if you want to say no refund, that's fine. That's a business decision, but you need to let the consumer know and put yourself in the situation that you're the consumer, and you need to have those disclosures. You need to have that information. So we engage with the regulated community like that, or through industry representatives. We also have another program that we call VIP, the Visiting Inspector Program, where new businesses can actually reach out to us and schedule an appointment for one of our senior inspectors to come and do a very detailed walkthrough with you and tell you, hey, like, there's pay attention to this, pay attention to that. These are the things that we're going to be looking for, and make sure that, again, there's that understanding. Hopefully, within just like a couple months of opening, because there's a lot of, I get it, you got the permits and you get your merchandise and you're trying to put things on the shelf and the marketing of it all. So take some time to make that appointment and talk with us and make sure that the information is there. I will say that, what is important to remember, that the laws that are in place, we have to enforce them, right? We have that obligation of enforcing them. And it serves also as a way to um, leverage the playing field, right? You want some businesses pay more attention than others. Why some do it or not, I don't know, but some pay more attention than others and do take the time and do spend money, right, to be in compliance. It's not fair to those businesses if we're not enforcing the law against the ones that are not following it. So we want to do that, but we do try to do it in a balanced way and make sure that our information is accessible, that is accessible in multiple languages, like you mentioned. We take a lot of pride in having team members that speak different languages. We bring them with us when we're especially doing the education piece so that we can get rid of the language barrier. All of those things are efforts that we put in place. Some neighborhoods have the BIDs, right? The business improvement districts. They help us connect with the businesses. Again, local elected officials. If there's more ideas, we want to hear them. We really want to do things in a way that are accessible and people can understand them and they don't get, we're
Commissioner,
not trying to hit a quota with fines.
Commissioner, when you're on a walkthrough and somebody doesn't have the proper whatever, do they get a pass?
When I'm doing a walkthrough, they're educational. So yes, they don't,
Oh,
there's no
okay. So let's
fines
say
or
the
issues.
sign is missing or the scale is
Right.
off.
Yes.
If the
No,
scale's
exactly.
broken when you come, that's it. They get a pass.
Yeah, but they don't get they yes, they get a pass, but that's because we're doing education. And when we're doing education, we really mean it. We want your guard to come down. We want you to ask questions. We want you to know what you have to comply with.
So
You don't go
conceivably,
on
I
the
could
list.
got it. So conceivably, I could have the broken scale, and if you happen to walk in that day, okay,
Yes.
well, all right.
Yeah, yeah, no, you do.
I have another question, Commissioner. Where do you end? Where do you begin in Department of Health steps in? Again, think about it. You're in, so let's say you go into the local bodega.
Hmm.
Been known to happen, and partly it's out of a necessity, where now they're selling hot food in
Hmm.
bodegas. They have steam tables.
Yes.
So let's say they have a steam table. Is that regulated by Consumer Worker Protection? Or is that separate? Or because it's food, does that
Hmm.
fall under the bucket of the Department of Health? Because I've heard that too from business owners. Meaning
Okay.
they could pass hypothetically a Consumer Worker Protection inspection
Right.
or get fined by DCWP, and then very next day or concurrently come in and then they'll get a B or C from the
Hmm.
Department of Health on something, you know? So
Yeah.
please draw the distinction on in terms of the enforcement agencies.
Hmm.
Okay, or you know, you hear, which is another one that's been controversial, the sort of crash on nightlife, right? Where multiple agencies come in and you could
Right.
walk out of there with anywhere from 10 to 15 fines from a bucket of different agencies, right? And that's another complaint you hear. It's like,
Right.
okay, how am I supposed to do business with the city when it's so
Yeah.
arbitrary, right? Or it's hard to follow who's on first.
Yeah, I don't think I can agree with that it is arbitrary. I think what happens is that it is a big city, which makes it a big government, right? And then every agency has their role. And it is true that I don't think we're necessarily coordinating with each other because then everybody has to do like their plan and like make sure that they can fit all of their requirements in and hit all the marks that they required to hit, right? Like we also have like our performance measures of making sure that we are protecting consumers and that we are also being, like I said before, fair to the businesses that are really just complying. What I would say is that in terms of those that sell food, for example, as you were sharing with the delis and some of them like have different, I've read some of the articles also of a lot of the places be like, I'll just offer you just as good of food and it's just like a couple tables maybe. It's not like a big restaurant. There are going to be things that we are in charge of. Our inspectors have a general understanding of things that are also Department of Health, for example. They're not going to know all of the little details, but they might, to the extent that they know, they will raise it with the business and say, you know, it's not us, but keep in mind there's this piece. And I'll make it really simple. Look at the straws, right? You cannot have the plastic straws. You could, but they upon request, right? So you got to make sure that it's not so easily accessible right there. Like some business will just put it in the counters. People easy, they can take it. I don't want them to ask me for it. I was like, well, unfortunately, they need to be asked for it. And there's a bunch of policy rationales behind it, right? Depending on the agency. Take tobacco, for example. We do enforce tobacco and e-cigarette licenses. Uh-oh, what happened here? Can you see me? Okay, sorry. I thought there was something with my computer. Um, there are different policy decisions that come, and those are discussions that happen before a law is put in the book. So I will say that businesses shouldn't just talk amongst each other. I think it's important for them to raise issues that they don't agree with and that they see as problematic, they should talk. If there's an industry association that they belong to, please bring in there, right? It could be that, it could be a chamber of commerce, it could be a business improvement district, it could be your local elected officials. Bring it to them because that is feedback that is important. I'm not saying we're going to agree with it, and I'm not saying we're going to have the fix that the person wants, but nobody should assume that we know and that we've tackled it, because it's many more businesses than even the inspectors that are coming in from the various agencies. And so it's important to have the conversation, understand each other's roles, understand where people are coming from, understand the rationale behind things. Because I will tell you, Roberto, that we also take that information when we testify at city council hearings for legislation. We don't just talk about, oh yeah, this is good for a consumer or this is good for a worker. We like to also talk about operationally the things, the challenges that we see when we're doing the enforcement and what we may see as not really accomplishing the goal that the legislation is supposed
Too
to
punitive.
accomplish.
It's too punitive in some cases.
Exactly. Like we need, so it's important to have that conversation at all levels. I definitely welcome it. I'd like to think that other commissioners will do the same, but I think it's important. We can't just be hiding behind a piece of legislation and say, this is, my hands are tied and I
No,
can't talk
yeah,
about
or
it. It's
say
always
it's
waste.
impractical. Yeah, you can say
Right.
it's impractical. Question, I have a few up or down questions. Can a business say cash only?
No. I'm sorry. Yes.
So a business can technically say, we don't accept cards, we don't accept cash only is acceptable?
Cash only is acceptable. The opposite, like, sorry, I got confused. The opposite is not acceptable.
Interesting. Oh,
Yes.
wow. Did not know that.
People are surprised. You're right. Your
Yeah.
reaction is.
How about can a business say, I don't take pennies?
No, because that's
No,
cash.
but wait, boy, I'm speaking to you like as a consumer. I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen signs. I mean, they make them themselves, but I've seen it. That's not,
No, I mean, I now you're making me like doubt myself, but it's more from the perspective of, there are every business in New York City has to accept cash. To be honest with you, I don't know that we've defined cash to like include only certain currencies and not others, but I'm
okay.
more thinking
That's
from the
fine.
perspective that I think it's okay. I believe that it's okay for a business, for example, to say we don't take something bigger than a 50, right? I mean, we've
Got
seen
it.
that. And so I'm reverting that to the pennies, to
No,
your
that's fine.
position
That's
of,
fine.
of pennies. But the focus of our law is that there's a cashless ban. Every business in New York City has to accept cash. We unfortunately, we unfortunately have 7% of our households that don't have a bank account. And that's an issue that we're trying to tackle as well, right, through our Office of Financial Empowerment. And that talk about the rationale, right? It's like, why do we care? It's like we have a lot of families that don't have a piece of plastic. And so we need to be able to allow them to be part of the marketplace in our city.
Got it. Got it, Commissioner. How about, so let's say, okay, there are 8.5 million people. I think it's more, right? It's got to be more than 8.5, 9, because people, no, people don't, the census numbers, etc. And I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of business. How many inspectors does DCWP have?
Not enough.
Okay. Well, give me a ballpark. How many?
Uh, oh my gosh.
It's okay
Maybe
in the range. In the range.
in the range between 40 and 60.
Or
I know. Like, I wish, I mean, this is odd. You're in that people
that's a
see your face.
lot.
I don't know because
That's a
it's not,
lot.
it's
I'm talking about that's not many.
no, it's not many. It's really not many. And so we, we're always looking at our internal processes and trying to see how we streamline things. And, I'll give you an
Yeah.
example, which sort of relates a little bit what you were saying before about, these inspectors from different agencies coming and it's like, oh my gosh, let me breathe, right? From the business perspective. When you have so few like us, we use like a mapping tool, right? So like if our inspectors have a number of places they're gonna go, we do use a mapping tool to make sure that they're maximizing the amount of time that they're spending to go from one place to the next, and ensure that we are doing our piece with like
And
oversight.
how does one file a complaint as a consumer, or Fair Work Week, or paid sick leave? How does
Yeah.
someone file a complaint? Is it via 311? Is it online? If I have, let's say somebody has a workplace issue, well,
Yes.
how do they make the complaint?
All of the above. They can call 311. And if it's workers, it helps to say workers, like literally the word workers
Got
for
it. Got it.
311 to channel it, or consumer. But we have in the last couple of years really improved our website with a
Got it.
portal to make it much easier and why I say it's much easier is because we used to have a very general form, but we've improved it to basically, based on the answers that you give as you're completing the form, is going to trigger other questions so that we have as much information as possible to look into it, or any follow-up that we need to do, we'll do it as well with the complainant. But we've improved that piece.
So Commissioner, let's say I file a complaint, 311 complaint, my rights have been violated. I understand they've been violated. With so few inspectors, or what is the timeline on follow-up? When can I
This is
expect a response?
yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it does
No,
give me an opportunity
I'm a
to.
consumer.
I know, no, that's good. That's good. Yes, 100%. So it depends. And I know that might seem like, okay, depends on what.
okay,
And I'm going
okay.
to tell you. So we have on the consumer services side, it's relatively quickly, and I apologize because I just don't have the time frames in front of me. But
Don't worry. Do the best you can with the.
yeah, but basically we have a mediation services unit, right? We call them consumer
Okay.
services, and when a complaint comes in, that's going to be the first line, right? Like they're going to try to mediate your case. They're going to contact the business to try to mediate the situation, assuming it's a jurisdiction as well, right? Because we got to look at that and make sure we don't want to keep you waiting for someone if it's not going to be something that is us to be able to address. But oftentimes it is, right? So we do that, and I hope people please respond to our messages, because then sometimes that's the other piece that happens, that people don't respond to our outreach once we've gotten their complaint, and then we don't have enough to pursue the matter. But that's it. We have a mediation services unit, and we're going to look into that. We have a way to basically track what's coming in and pay attention to any trends, right? If like we start seeing the same name pop over and over again on the business side of things, we're like, okay, we're going to take a deeper look into this. And the reason why that I'm stressing that is because that piece is not really going to relate to the inspector numbers anymore, right? If you have an issue and a mediation services unit resolves it, that doesn't necessarily involve an inspector. Oftentimes it doesn't. And then if we start seeing a pattern, like a name, we start seeing an issue that pops up, that's also something that is going to be first going to go more through our attorneys to review and see, should we send an inspector, or is this like a simple request that we make via letter to a company, to a business, right? But then sometimes what happens is, yes, a business may, I'm sorry, an individual consumer may call 311, and then that could also, yes, that could trigger an inspector to go and make a visit. It doesn't take a week. I guess I can tell you at least that for an inspector, if that's what we've determined, it doesn't take a week for the inspector to go out and check out the business and make sure that we have what we need and we can put a stop at whatever illegal practices may be in place.
Commissioner, there's a bunch of legislation. I want to be mindful of your time. So I'm going to do sort of a lightning round of some things I'm interested in. So now third-party vendors, right? They're terms of pay and hourly rates, and Grubhub, Uber Eats. Now the sort of mayor vetoed it, but there was an override.
Right.
And there's other legislation, right? And fundamentally, it's about workers' rights and doing the right thing by people in an extremely unaffordable city. All fair. But now, when you see all this legislation passing, and you're the enforcement arm, and you realize there's only but so, right? When you think about all the pro-worker, deservedly so, legislation, somebody's got to manage it, right? Somebody
Yes.
has to make sure these things are you know, they're again enforcement. Um,
100%.
what do you, and then it's a two, how can I say, it's a two-way street when it comes to the budget process. And you go in front of the council and you do budget hearings. Is
Mm-hmm.
there some point where you say, okay, you can legislate all you want in terms of practicality, but how about finding me money for my budget to hire? You know,
Yes,
you hear it over and
I
over
know.
again, all the holes in the agencies, you know, and
Yeah,
sometimes these civil servants, you know, don't make a whole lot of money, right? So
I know.
retaining, retention, hiring,
Yeah.
finding people that want to do the job, sometimes
Yeah.
it's a thankless job and the pay's not great.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that world? And I know it's a broad question,
Mm-hmm.
but people need to know this, right? Because the average
Mm-hmm.
person doesn't know the behind the scenes, right?
That's right.
You know, they only see what they see, right? I remember during COVID, you know, there were decisions that had to be made because the federal money wasn't coming in, right? So people were like, how come my garbage is piling up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hypothetically, right? But you know,
Right.
sometimes people don't know all sides of the story, so to speak. So talk a little bit about that. How do you manage it? How do you navigate it? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So I think one thing that we're able to do now, because you're right, every law is going to need new resources to be able to be implemented by the charging agency. And so we do now get to share a fiscal impact statement with
mm,
the council usually before the hearing takes place. So it's a lot easier to talk about it that way and openly in terms of what are the resources needed. It doesn't mean that is a guarantee that we're going to get those resources if the bill passes. We do try to have those honest conversations. And I think if anybody looks at our testimony, the last year or so, when those fiscal impact statements started being required as part of the process, you'll see that we do say we need these resources in order to make it happen. After the legislation passes, yes, it is a conversation more with OMB, right, to make sure that they do agree with the needs that we've put out. We're very proud of my agency for doing it in a very responsible way. We're not trying to get more than we're supposed to just to make up for previous cuts. We're trying to really quantify what we need. And it's important to remember that it's not just those who may be more publicly seen, like an inspector, even an attorney, because you actually read the name, but it's also the technology that goes behind it and how we're going to support these individuals and the marketing piece of it. Do I need marketing money to get the word out? Because, as I say, you can pass all the laws that you want and they're all going to go in a beautiful book, I suppose. But if those that we're trying to protect with the legislation or make things even in the regulated community, we don't spend money to promote that, then we're not really accomplishing much. Nobody's going to come with
yeah.
complaints. Nobody's like, we're not going to really achieve much. So it is definitely, it's been helpful to have that piece, but we are more open about it ourselves, I think, in our agency to really express to those who may support our work to remember that the path to make something happen doesn't stop with getting the votes to pass a piece of legislation. We need the advocacy as well to say, okay, if this needs to be for this piece of legislation to be successful, the agency needs to be properly funded.
Commissioner, last question, and this is sort of the last policy question that is again is very contentious. There's a lot of sides to this. There's a brick and mortar store that says I get enforcement, I get regulated. There's a street vendor right in front of me who sells produce, who sells hot food. No one's holding them accountable. There's also a conversation of, well, let's just print out more licenses,
Mm-hmm.
right? If
Right.
everyone has a license, then you don't have a problem, then everyone's accountable. We know who's where, who's that. Now you no longer do the sort of enforcement. I know it's now civil, not criminals, my understanding. I want you to explain again, because mathematically, one would say, well, if you just print more licenses, problem solved, right? Like
Yeah.
get more driver's licenses, right? Hypothetically, please explain what the fundamental problem is, because I know there is a certain number that have to be allocated every year. There's obviously a veteran's preference, there's
Right.
other nuance to it, but there's a
Right.
number close to 500 annually. And then they're saying so please, I want to hear it directly from the commissioner.
Sure, sure.
Why isn't it as easy as saying, okay, come one, come all? We'll charge
Right.
you X amount of dollars for your street vendor license. We'll get the revenue, much needed city revenue for the coffers of the city, and problem solved, right? We'll have more money. We can hire more inspectors. Why isn't it
Yeah.
as simple as that? Please
It
explain
is.
that to me.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely a complicated issues, and I think with a lot of stakeholders. And there is you're actually talking more about the licenses from the Department of Health that are the food vendor licenses, because there's also what we call general vendor licenses, right? Those who don't sell food, and they both have caps. The 500 that you're referring to is more the ones that sell food, and there's that process ongoing for that. For the general vendor licenses, you're right. It's only 853. That's the cap right now. And then there is no limit for those who are veterans or relatives, and there's some details there. It is, it is so challenging. And where I've seen the issue have the most success, honestly, has been in districts where the local council member brings all the parties together, and it's like, okay, now let's really talk to each other and not about each other, right? Because everybody needs to understand their position and their challenges, because like you said, with the brick and mortar, you're paying a rent, that is limited space, but the sidewalk is also limited space, and you also need, even if you don't want to think about the competition of businesses, of course there's the consideration of individuals. If you have a baby and you're with the stroller, if you have a wheelchair, you have a walker, you just simply want to walk the sidewalk. There are definitely a lot of needs, and so it is not an easy issue to tackle, but I do think it can be tackled. And we are in conversations with the city council, because I know there is proposed legislation related to at least the general vendor licenses, to figure out what are the considerations to keep in mind. We don't do the enforcement anymore. We're just only doing the processing of the licenses. So, of course, the conversation would need to happen with the Department of Sanitation as well, since they are the ones that started doing the enforcement in 2023.
Let's have some fun before we wrap it up. What advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
Ay, ay, ay. Um, you know, I always fail at this question. This is terrible. I should know this. It's like I should be thinking about my 15-year-old. And just probably doesn't change much. I'm not sure that brains develop as much. I will say this because I don't think I learned this until maybe my 30s. Success doesn't look any particular way.
Hmm.
And the reason why I say that is because we, based on what's fed to our brains, right? We think that to be successful, we have to become someone else, whether it is in looks or in way of thinking or in way of talking, or who we hang out with. But in reality, you got to stay so true to your beliefs and on who you are. And that's how you're going to be successful, because people will see that you are true and you don't change. And there's only one of you that they get all the time.
Can I say something about that? You think very, very good point. One of your paisanos, Bad Bunny, not an economist. No,
Yes.
listen, not an economist, not the president of the
Mhm.
United States, meaning it's a
That's right.
commonwealth. What was it? Was it 1 billion he brought into the economy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about it,
100%.
right? You would think, right? Oh, the budget office, a finance expert. And he best stay
Staying
on
true
the
to
job.
himself.
So now there is a 4-year term that's about to end, separate of the politics. In the 4 years you've been commissioner, what's been the highlight of? I know there's been many days, but if you'd point one thing, one proud moment that you say, "Wow, this is why I do this work," what would
I
it be?
I you know, I will go with the minimum pay rate for delivery workers. And I say that because it is the one piece of legislation that, although it passed before I became commissioner, I've been there for the whole process to implement it and operationalize it. And needless to say, there were so many naysayers about it, not just whether we will get to implement it, but to show how successful it has been and it has not negatively impacted anybody in that ecosystem, right? People are getting a decent wage now, the workers. Deliveries are still up in the millions. Nobody's suffering from it.
Yeah,
Everybody's doing better.
they're gonna be just fine. I have a
Exactly.
question now. Worst day, toughest day, the time you've been
Toughest.
commissioner.
Ay, ay, ay. I do ay, ay, ay a lot.
That's fine. No, that's fine.
Toughest day. Um, I mean, listen, it's gonna sound a little funny, but probably my first
No,
budget
that's
hearing. I'll tell you my first budget hearing. But
yeah,
I
yeah.
think part of it was because I started 2 weeks before I had to do my first budget hearing. And that was probably the worst because I like speaking about things that I know, and 2 weeks was just not enough time for me to know everything about the
Mhm.
agency. So that was probably the toughest part. But I have an incredible team, and they always make me look good, and that was one of the moments.
Yes. Now, last one, and then we'll wrap. Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yes.
You're Puerto Rican. If you were to say who is the most influential Puerto Rican in terms of the culture, in terms of representing what Boricuas are, in a positive light, and I'm gonna give you some names.
Oh boy.
You have Rita Moreno.
Okay.
You have and New York Ricans are included.
Yes.
Lin-Manuel Miranda, Mark
Mhm.
Anthony, J Lo, Bad Bunny,
You know, I'm gonna go with
Roberto
Happy.
Clemente, Roberto Clemente.
Roberto Clemente. Now you're making
I
it really
forgot to
hard.
mention
Oh
athletes.
gosh.
You
You
know what? I'll
know,
give you three. I'll give you three.
yeah.
I'll let you off the hook.
Well, I was just gonna. I mean, I was gonna say Bad Bunny first. It's obviously very current, and
More
I think
impactful than all of those. Oh, interesting.
well, no, but it's just the current times, right? Like I'm thinking about that is the closest, my age. I mean, I'm not as young as him, but just like what's current, what I remember the most, and those things. But everybody that you mentioned had to overcome bias and had to overcome naysayers and had to like really like prove in a way that others wouldn't have to prove, right? What we're about and that we are successful and that we are like amazing individuals in our communities. Honestly, Roberto, I know sometimes people don't like this. My mom, I actually, if you didn't give me an option, I was gonna tell you
No,
my
it's
mom,
fine. Well, yeah.
because my mom is the one who really raised me and my sister. My dad's very present in my life, but we really grew up with my mom, and she overcame so much as a woman who had two daughters and gave up all her life just to make sure that we had what we needed. And even though we were basically poor, I never felt poor because she just made sure that we knew where was the happiness. How can we happy? What is it that we really needed to know and to do? And just it's my mom. She's still my North Star. She drives me crazy and I drive her even crazier.
Yeah.
But she's my model.
So, Commissioner, I'm sorry it went a little over, but I want to let you, anything you want to add that I forgot to ask you that you want to mention before we wrap up?
Well, lately I've been ending with making a plug for people to follow our social media. because I
Ah,
want
nice.
people to know about our work and get money if we have it for them, which is at Hello DCWP. So get that handle in your various social media accounts so you stay in the know, because we got money. We want to give money to people. We want you to file complaints, but we want to give you any money that we recoup for consumers and workers.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your time, and thank you to your team for making this happen. All the very best to you. Thank you.
Thank you.